All right, thank you. We're starting the workshop for July 15th. Roll call, please.
Councilmember McKenzie.
Here.
Councilmember Schwer.
Here.
Councilmember Nordby is absent. Councilmember Woods is absent. Mayor Monge.
Here. Thank you. I get a motion to adopt the agenda, please.
So moved.
So move, Councilmember Schwer.
I'll second.
Second, Councilmember Kinsey. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor. We have one item on the agenda for topics tonight, and would be the 2026 budget, specifically the CIP, and dealing more with the streets than any other part of the CIP. So I'm going to turn that over to our Finance Director, Dan Winnick. Start us off.
Mayor, council member, thank you very much. Good news and bad news tonight. Bad news is you're going to have to hear from me for a little while. Good news is I'm not going to talk for the whole hour and 15 minutes. We got Morgan, our city engineer, and Ron, our public works director, will do most of the talking tonight. Want to kind of take you, just kind of a reminder of where we're at right now with the budget. My understanding is that we're not going to focus a lot on our operating budgets. If we look at our operating budgets outside of our cost of living increases and step increases for personnel, we actually reduced what I call our supplies, our contractual services from our budgets. And so really the biggest change outside of the salaries is really capital. And capital all comes from the CIP, the Capital Improvement Plan. So really we need to focus on that because there's really a lot of tough decisions that City Council is going to have to make. And I'll kind of emphasize that as I kind of go through this, and I'll go through it relatively quickly. But right now, tonight, we'll just kind of look at the 2026 proposed levy. We'll look at some other factors that potentially could have an impact in the future on the city. And then we'll look at where the 2026-2035 Capital Improvement Plan is at. There'll be a lot of discussion on streets, preventative pavement preservation, and the utility infrastructural for the major reconstruction projects. And then we'll open it up for discussion. Right now, where the proposed levy is at, for the city portion of the levy, we're at a 6%. Right now, we have no utility rate increases. This is kind of a breakdown of where the proposed levy. As you can see, part of our levy components, we have the general fund, we have street maintenance, we have park, and we have asset preservation, and we have debt. And those are, kind of the 5 components that make up the primary component for the city's levy. We also have levies for HRA and EDA, and if you remember, we're keeping them at this proposed moment just the same as they have been in 2025. What that does is that it reaches the 6% increase for the city levy. If you remember, to achieve this, and we will have discussion on this at a future date before we do the maximum levy, to achieve that 6%, we had to do a penalty transfer from the electric remains. We did that last year for the first time for the 2025 budget. We would keep that in place. The EAB removal, because eventually that'll go away, that we're taking that advantage now, and we're shifting the funding from the general fund to the asset preservation fund in the amount of $90,000. We're restoring some enterprise transfers in the amount of just about $65,000. What that total of $286,000 translates to is that it was able to reduce our levy about 3.7. If we don't take all of those, we have a levy of 9.7. So that's how we achieve that 6% levy. Some of the changes, as you can see, where we're not going to be focusing a lot on the operational side to it, although we can answer any questions that City Council has on that. But our, personnel costs, because cost of living due to the, the contracts, there's no additional FTEs being requested. It's almost $300,000, or 3.8% of the levy increase. We see our supplies, our contractual services, and capital in our general fund are decreasing $337,000, a 4.33% levy decrease. You see there's a transfer, a reduction of $20,000. That's an item that we'll end up talking about at a later point in time, because that was what was needed to make the community center whole for 2025. And then all other changes are $87,000. So our general fund itself only increases $28,000, or 0.4% of a levy increase. The other increases are really from those other four components: the streets, the parks, the asset preservation, and the debt. All four of those categories are related to the capital improvement plan. That's why it really is important that we focus on that capital improvement plan, and really understand the impact of what that capital improvement plan does or doesn't do for the city. Here's where the debt levy is at. As you can see, we have a new debt that's being added for 2026, and that was the bond that was just issued earlier this year for the 2025 street reconstruction plan, or project. Other factors just to keep in mind, if you remember earlier on, we kind of talked about that the state of Minnesota was looking at about a $6 billion deficit in their 2028-2029 fiscal year. After legislation of this year and the passing, there's been some reductions, and now they're kind of projecting it to be about a $2.2 billion reduction. There was discussion in both the House and the Senate of making reductions in the local government aid. And I have a slide here just to kind of show you some different projections onto that of what kind of type of impact that could be for the city. But we have about a $1.6 million that we get in local government aid. In addition, the bill and budget that was proposed, or that was passed by the federal government just recently, that there's funding and that's going to be reduced for Medicaid and SNAP programs. That doesn't necessarily directly, those two programs don't necessarily directly impact the city, but it definitely will impact the county, Ramsey County, especially that SNAP program. And so if they don't make adjustments, they're going to have levy increases on the county level, and they're going to see potentially some programs and or staff reductions moving forward. To kind of look at our local government aid, we get a little over $1.6 million. If there was a 1% reduction, you know, that's $16,000 or a 0.2% increase in our levy. If you can see the table there, 2, 3, 4, 5. If it was a 5%, you know, that would be about a 1% increase in our levy. We're not going to see that moving into 2026. It's something we need to be aware of that may end up happening to us as we move into the 2027 budget and the budgets thereafter. So now we focus on the 2026-2035 capital improvement plan. And when we look at that capital improvement plan, over 10 years, it amounts to $100 million. That's a hefty price tag. And what you're going to see is that the majority of that money is going to be in streets, facilities, and parks. To be able to afford that plan means that we're going to have to continuously levy about $250,000 for street and street debt, or about a 3.2% levy increase. Parks, with the plan that's here right now, would require an additional $30,000. That's not included in that 6% figure that we had started with. So that's another discussion item that we'll have moving forward into the future as we set the maximum levy. It would bring the total up to about $76,000, or almost 1% of a levy increase. And then the asset preservation is requiring $142,000 annual levy increase, about 1.8%. We total that's $467,000. That's about a 6% annual increase. That's not just 1 year. That's every single year for the next 10 years. We will start off with a budget to afford this capital improvement plan of approximately a 6% levy increase. And in addition to that, there's going to be some needs and changes both in the equipment, internal service fund, and the building maintenance fund We're going to need to increase them starting in 2027 of approximately 5% per year. That'll have a levy impact of just under 4%, and then it has a non-levy impact, and where that impact is that that's hitting our enterprise funds. So that's hitting our electric, our water, our wastewater, our solid waste, our surface water. The rates that are going to be needed to be able to capitalize or to be able to afford all of this in our enterprise funds is yet to be determined, but we will, I will finish those calculations up and have them before we do our maximum levy certification. But there will be increases in our rates to be able to afford this capital improvement plan. That's why it's so important that we have this discussion, because this is really the biggest driving factor of what is driving our levy. When we look at the categories of the levy, and this pie chart will show, you can see there's one big, huge component, and that's streets and utility reconstruction. And it's approximately 44% over the next 10 years. There's also another little sliver over there to the right called pavement preservation. That's 6%. When we combine those two, it's about, it's a $50 million. So 50% of what the funding that we're going to need for the next 10 years is really related to our street, one of our infrastructural components to it. So with that, we're going to just focus tonight on the street component to it, and that's what makes up the street components to it is the pavement preservation program that has, the maintenance overlays, crack sealing, striping. There's some parking lots that are included into that component, and then there's a street and utility reconstruction. And you'll see that we have had a plan that every other year we bond for major reconstruction projects. We currently did that in 2025. The next one scheduled is 27 to finish up the project that is currently going on. Then there's 29 and 31. What this plan doesn't have at this point in time is 2033 and 2035, but there is pavement rehabilitation dollars that have been put into there. That'll be information that will end up having to come, but it probably won't come until later part of this year to put in there. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Morgan, our city engineer, and Ron to kind of discuss, and they handed out a 2024 pavement management report. This was given to City Council about 2 years ago when we started implementing that pavement rehabilitation, to have something in those off years from the major project reconstruction to get our road rating up higher. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Morgan. He's going to kind of walk you through parts of that report. And really what we're trying to show is that there really is a need on this infrastructure for the streets. So there'll be time for questions and answers, and following what Morgan has, if there's any clarification and so forth that we need. So with that, this is the good news. I get to stop talking. You get to stop listening to me, and we'll turn it over to Morgan.
Thanks, Dan. Appreciate it, Morgan.
Mr. Mayor, members of the council. So at your desk, you should have a copy of the latest pavement management report, which is kind of the state of the city's streets. We do this annually. This is something that I've presented past councils on, usually during the budget time, just to give an understanding of where we are with our streets, what kind of changes we've seen from past activities like pavement preservation projects, some of the street and utility reconstruction projects, basically the significant capital reinvestment that the city and past city councils has committed to in the past, and be able to understand and hopefully measure and have some metrics behind what we're seeing. This is it's a very data-driven process. So every third of the city's streets is rated each year. So every 3 years, we have a complete picture of the condition of all of our miles of roads and streets and alleyways throughout the city. And we have mapping that is a very important tool for Public Works to be able to understand how are our streets degrading over time? How quickly are they? How do those streets and the locations interact with underground utilities like water main breaks? And they're very important to be able to make decisions about, well, where is the next project going to be, or where's the next maintenance overlay project going to be? And it takes some of the guesswork out of it, right? So the ability for a city to have some qualitative data to be able to understand the condition of its streets rather than just knowing, well, that neighborhood is bad or this neighborhood is good and how much better or how not. This, on a scale of 0 to 100, allows the city staff, city council to be able to better understand the condition of its infrastructure and be able to understand and hopefully make informed decisions in terms of those significant investments that Finance Director Winnick has mentioned previously and that are certainly under consideration for the current budget and the current capital improvement plan. So just a couple high-level executive summary points to be able to share with you what we're seeing this year compared to last year, and for the benefit of the public, and there's some newer council members on the council at this time that maybe weren't a part of my past presentations. I mentioned that we rate a third of the city every year. The last rating in 2024 was mostly the downtown area and the area kind of just south of that. So, and the reason why that's significant is that because of COVID, and there's a little bit of a pause in there in terms of our rating activities, there was a gap in the ratings from 2019 to 2024. So it was a significant update for 1/3 of the city. And in that downtown area, as you know, we saw several projects in 2020, 2022, 7th Avenue, and some other areas adjacent to that. So there were some investments that brought roadways that were previously deteriorated and of a lower rating up to a rating of 100. Certainly when they're brand new, they go to 100, and then they slowly degrade over time. So what that did is it actually provides a much more accurate picture of the overall city, and we did see an overall weighted average for the whole city of pavement condition for all streets improved from I think it was 56 on a 0 to 100 scale to 67 on a 0 to 100 scale. So a 10-point jump there approximately. So that's a very positive, call it return on investment, but a good indication that we didn't have last year where it was a little bit flat. And I think we were kind of at the bottom of the inflection point, and now maybe we're turning the corner. And based on some of these projects and ongoing investment, we're hopefully going to be able to see an improving trend over time. At least that's what I expect. Time will tell, and we will have the data to be able to see that year over year, future budget discussions, future considerations for the capital improvement plan is that always is going to be kind of an evolving document. What you approve, this year doesn't mean that it's going to be the same capital improvement plan 2 years from now, right? So this will, on an ongoing basis, this will provide some information, metrics, again, to inform not only the decisions this year, but in the future. But that improvement is, I think, worth noting. So as I mentioned, part of the pause there and updating that particular part of town had something to do with it. And we also, I think, based on those projects, as I mentioned, in 22, 23, and 24, overall on the system are also contributing to that. So that's the first thing I'd like to point out. On page 3, which is basically the second page of the report, is a graph, basically a bar graph that we have looked at in the past. And what we do is on the far left grouping there, that's all of our roads. But we also can look at these different types of roads. So collector roads would be busier roads, such as like Margaret Street, and that carry more traffic, more high volume roads. And you would expect them to be of a little bit higher quality or higher rating than maybe just local roads. That's pretty typical community to community. knowing that they carry more traffic and maybe just on a general ongoing basis, there's a preference to have them be on average higher rating than maybe just local roads on average. The next category is termed local, so that would be all the other streets that are not collector roads throughout the city. So, you know, neighborhoods, residential streets, including cul-de-sacs, right? So the current average for local streets citywide is 61, just over 61. And in 2024, the collector road average, which includes 7th Avenue, as I mentioned, several projects in the last several years in this area that was just re-rated in 2024, that's jumped up to 75. So that's actually a really strong rating for collector roads for the city. We also, in the next two groupings, can separate and look at what is our average for all our roads that are asphalt, and then the next one is all our roads that are concrete. So that's mostly 7th Avenue, but also portions of Margaret Street are concrete pavement, so not a significant mileage of roads, but we do maintain concrete roads a little bit differently, and there are certainly more upfront costs to install or reconstruct them a little bit different than asphalt roads, so we like to group those separately. And then finally, alleyways as well, too, are looked at. So again, you can see from the green bar, which is the most currently rating, across the board, we're seeing some improvement there for the reasons that I've previously stated. I will note that, as stated in the report here, and this was a trend or an observation last year as well too, that you know, the city has shown its ability to maintain the current condition of the pavement network and the roadway system, and now ongoing, you know, we're looking at a potential positive trend in terms of an improvement. As I said, time will tell. In future years, we'll hopefully be able to bear that out for the benefit of the public and the benefit of the city. But just to point out, as Dan mentioned, to like, you know, the decision-making in terms of budgeting or level of investment, it is certainly important. Last year, we did run several test scenarios that did bear out the fact that at the, you know, generally speaking, the level of investment that is included in the capital improvement plan now as proposed is expected to at least hold its own, if not improve over time. And that's my expectation moving forward. But once you start dialing that back or putting a pause in there, it really doesn't take long for the portion of the overall city's street network that has not yet been improved, because that degrades day over day, year over year, to pull the whole average down, right? So just looking at the overall averages is just a tool. It's not indicating, you know, that one city is better than the other city, but in terms of the city being able to understand where it's at with its infrastructure assets, roadway assets, which is a significant asset for basically all residents plus the traveling public, folks that visit North St. Paul, folks that travel through North St. Paul. It gives you a better understanding of what is happening and what might happen in the future, and how that relates to current levels of investment and future levels of investment for, you know, decision considerations by this council and future city councils as well. So finally, I think just in terms of, you know, something that I mentioned previously that is a reasonably good tool to understand kind of ongoing investment. On page 12 is a graph that kind of compares the over time how the quality of asphalt roadways deteriorates over the course of 10, 20, 30, 40 years, sometimes longer than that. And you know, measuring that on a 0 to 100 scale. And the point that that graph is trying to make is that with spending very specific lower amounts at interval periods throughout the life of a roadway, rather than just leaving it alone for 40 years, you can actually extend the life of a roadway out much further, and you'll be far ahead on money and investment versus just doing nothing and waiting till it's time to reconstruct the road. So, I mean, the little note on the graph is spending $1 on preservation earlier on and several more frequent times throughout the life of a roadway eliminates or delays spending $25 to $30 on rehabilitation or reconstruction later on down the road. And that is the strategy that Public Works and myself have tried to adopt and have tried to implement since the initiation of the current pavement preservation program, which started approximately 2014, 2012, 2014 was when that initial capital improvement plan was developed. And so Public Works does stay on top of doing things like sealing cracks every 2 to 3 years. I think some of you have been a part of authorizing some of those contracts. They're smaller expenses, but they go a long way to kind of keeping that graph up high as opposed to just kind of let it fall off over time. And again, you know, if you do nothing and we can expect 40 years out of a road, or maybe a little bit longer if we're lucky, but if we can do some of this ongoing regular investment and make that 60 years or 75 years, I mean, that's hopefully good investment and benefit for the public and the taxpayers as well, too. So with that, I'll finish with just letting you know that at the back end in the appendix, there is that citywide map. That's current as of last year, and last year's improved roadways. Certainly, the city is involved right now with the 2025 Street and Utility Improvement Project, which is up around Casey Lake. There's also a maintenance overlay project that is going to be hitting several roads kind of throughout the city, both north and south. So those are not included here. We would expect that when we re-rate the roads this year and we improve the rating for those specific streets, that we'll see some improvement again on that overall network average, right? So I'll be back probably if Dan has me again at a future meeting, you know, next year to kind of report on what we're seeing in 2026 based on the ratings that we would be doing this year. So with that, I'll stand for any questions the council might have, but that is our current most up-to-date quantitative, information that we have with respect to our roadway infrastructure network throughout North St. Paul.
Thank you, Morgan. Appreciate the report. It's good to see those numbers jump. That was quite a, it was quite nice to see for where they were a few years ago. So it's good to see that the effort we've been putting into it and the money the city has, that we're getting it back like this. Thank you. Anybody else have any questions?
Thank you so much. Really appreciate. Very informative. Is WSB or does North St. Paul fit any of the demographics or qualifications for any of the pilot programs for roads? Is that something we should be looking at? I know some of the smaller outlier, towns. I didn't know if that was something that WSB is aware of, and if North St. Paul would fit any of those programs.
Yeah, are you referring to like the local road research board, kind of research projects or that sort of thing? North St. Paul may. A lot of the research currently right now revolves around like emerging, I guess I'll call it emerging technologies, but it's really kind of, rehabilitation techniques, right? So not a lot with the more major kind of like overlay or mill and overlay or rehabilitation. Not much research is going on there, but there is a fair amount with respect to road rejuvenators or, I don't know, I'm going to sound really like technical here, but micro slurry, which is kind of like a very thin overlay. For me, and I'm an engineer and I'm all into technology and research and new things, but there's a big part of me that feels very strongly that unless somebody else is paying for it, I mean, experimentation is sometimes tough, especially with construction costs, right? Tough to just take those kind of risks because you don't really know if it's going to work or not. So it's certainly something that staff can look into. Again, it probably wouldn't be on more major projects, but it might be on alternative ways to deliver some of those incremental like sealing and or surface sealing or rejuvenating type of chemicals or operations that are out there that are more emerging, that are not more widely adopted, but that may be beneficial. And the reason why some of those pilot projects are happening is that there's just not enough data. Like nobody knows how they're going to perform. Some might perform well. I mean, I think it's hard to believe that some of the products or technologies out there will be detrimental, but some might not show much benefit. Some might show some benefit, and we just don't know yet, right? So WSB is always kind of monitoring those. there may be an opportunity to, fold in a neighborhood or a street or whatever. And so that's something that Public and Works and I can take a look at and see, what we might be able to bring to bear to North St. Paul in the future, whether that's a standalone pilot project or it's something that we look at and explore as an opportunity to just try something different and see if we get better results than what we're doing right now.
Awesome, thank you. And you're absolutely right. It is a risk versus reward, but I do know some of those pilot programs do have a little bit of financials attached to them where, it might take a little of the burden off the project. So, but it is a risk reward. I appreciate that.
Yeah, no, that's certainly something to look into.
How often have you done a micro blacktop style road, and how thin is the material that would go over it? And is there a trial and demo that the city could do to see in an alleyway that is in terrible shape, to find out how long it would last and not bear a lot of cost to the residents? But is there a grant available as a trial basis? We're doing some alleys that are really bad, that have been approved or improved in the last 25 years.
Yeah. That's exactly, I think, the question that we need to look into and potentially answer there to the point of Councilmember Nordby, right? So if there is a grant or if there's a pilot project that provides some funding assistance, I'm certain that we can find a road or an alley
Well,
be
you
able-
know,
that
that's-
hopefully is a good
that's the best way
candidate.
to
Yeah.
start is see where and how long it lasts per year or 2 years, whatever. And then also, are there any plans on the preservation of doing, putting the black sealer down and putting the gravel over on any of our streets to preserve it for another 3 to 5 years?
I can address that specifically. I've been a part of a lot of conversations over the past 20 years related to chip seals or, using trap rock. Seal coat is kind of like a common industry term for that. I am not a big fan. I've seen
I'm not either, but the
massive
grandkids
failures.
like to throw rocks.
Yeah, oh yeah. There have been massive failures, City of Woodbury, to the tune of $2 million a year to repair pop-outs and failures of bad seal coats over the top of asphalt roads. Going back to risk reward, many, many, many years ago, I got to the point after seeing basically how bad it is in certain communities and how expensive it is, that it's just not worth using that as a current rehabilitation or maintenance, I guess, activity. So for many, many years, I've been very upfront with Public Works. It's certainly not up to me. That's just my preference. We've talked about it. Unbeknownst to me, but further bolstered of my opinion, the city of Maplewood kind of placed a moratorium on seal coats back to, I think it was like the 90s, 96 is what it stuck in my head. So it's not just me, it's many, many other communities have kind of taken a pause on that particular application, or call it a technology. Used to be much more common, prior to the 2000s and earlier 2000s, and then there is just a lot of disagreement in the community about why it was happening. But again, we could talk all day long about why, or is it the oil emulsion, or they do it on a day that was too humid or whatever. Basically, it's just pointing fingers, but somebody gets caught holding the ball and spending a lot of money to fix these things. So I think that our personal, at least for now, in terms of Public Works and myself, our approach has been to focus on sealing the cracks. So sealing the cracks in the road or at the edge of the road, and our current specs for building roads actually builds in edge sealing, like underneath the gutter pan, which is where the water runs, to be able to fully try to keep as much moisture as we can out of the subbase, which is key, right? And especially if you've got poor soils, like we do throughout the city, keeping the moisture out helps to prevent tenting, helps to prevent salt from getting in there. And I think certainly North St. Paul has been much more on top of trying to keep those cracks sealed. Usually standard practice is like every 2 to 4 years, that sealer, which goes down is kind of like tar, and they put it's literally toilet paper. They put toilet paper over the top of it. And we've been doing a really, really good job. And I think, roads crack. Just because a road cracks doesn't mean it's a bad road, but sealing those cracks is really, really important. And I think we've seen good results from that, right? And so our expectation is that by doing that and not necessarily, I'm not saying that it's wasting money, but there are others out there that have said, I'm not going to spend on seal coats. I'm going to save that money and I'm going to put it into that mill and overlay project in year 15 or year 20. And people have done their own analyses in other cities, and they feel that there's money ahead in that strategy as well too, which is kind of similar to where we're coming at it. Now, we haven't gotten to that point where, like if the first reconstruction project was done in 2014, we haven't gotten to that point where that street would be overlaid in year, 15 or 20 or somewhere in there. I think the table in the report says maybe like 18 to 22 or something like that, but we're not there yet. But, again, in terms of the progression of the ongoing maintenance and preservation and protection of significant investment in roadways and asset management, call it, the management of these things as your assets, as your infrastructure assets, I would expect that, again, if we can continue that process of maintenance, that we will see better than average lifespans on our roads that have been reconstructed in recent memory. And hopefully, again, be money ahead because of that by using those incremental investments over time to hold off and prevent the next time you need to reconstruct that road.
Dave, excuse me.
Yeah.
And Dave, we do have some roads in town that have been chip sealed. We haven't done them. They were roads that were done previously, and they have been done multiple times. And people would call them in as potholes, actually where these failed. And for us going out when we usually go out patching, we blow the road with a blower, clean the dirt out of the holes, fill the holes. Well, some of these roads we can't even use a blower on because it'll come out in big sheets for it, and there's multiple layers. Yeah, so.
Our alley too.
Yeah, because we talked about that, for, like Morgan said, for years about doing that. Does that help? It almost actually covers up the problems, and it doesn't allow you to actually, repair what is there. And you actually have to be careful how you maintain it or how you try to patch that road, because it, how it adheres or it doesn't, or over time, if salt gets underneath it. So I agree with Morgan, with that, and just talking with other cities. A lot of cities don't do it. You do still see it done out there, but from my experience, I agree with Morgan. How we're doing it now, I think, is the best bang for the
I
buck.
think our alley was sealed probably about 8-9 years ago. And now it's starting to go to that pothole city.
Yeah, and what's really hard with alleys is that we have so many roads that are bad. We know that a lot of the alleys are bad, but it's really hard to go into an alley when someone is like, my road is, bad. So it is on our radar, and we're gonna try to sneak some in here and there to do it, but it's definitely,
Appreciative of the roads.
yeah,
I'm just happy to have blacktop in the alley.
yeah. So we know, along with what Morgan said with the pavement index scores and all the engineering stuff that goes into that, also with these ratings, we also sit down with the people that go out and walk every inch of the roads, and we talk about, with our guys, we sit down with Morgan and his group, and our guys have heated discussions about which road should be done next or which should be up because of the potholes. So we do use all that information that WSB provides, but we also, Morgan sits down with the people that go out and walk every inch, and we kind of come up with, what the next plan or where we think the next project should be, so.
One thing I appreciate is the guys throwing the blacktop down, raking it out, and then they rolling it in so it sets in there.
Yeah.
That's huge, because when you just throw it in there, cars track it down the street, gets on their tires, and then it's gone within a day.
Yep, and you will see that happening. That happens usually at the beginning of the year, when we're just going out and filling like the big wheel busters or whatever, and we don't have the roller out yet, or we don't have the people to do that. But when that summer help starts, that's when we go out and like I said, we do that. We do that as little as possible because does make a mess and people do complain about that, but
No, I appreciate that.
I don't have an alley, so you got to forgive me a little bit. In North St. Paul, my understanding is heavy trucks cause a lot more damage than the passenger cars. In North St. Paul, do we allow or do we have the garbage trucks go down the alleys?
I do not allow it to go down our alley, because I know we only have a 2.5 inch micro base under it. The garbage rig does go down the alley between Helen and Margaret. That's why one of those alleys is really bad. And they should be shut down, and all the residents should actually put their stuff on the street.
And I guess one of the reasons why I was asking about this now is because I know we're going out for a bid for a different garbage company. Is that something, weighing the pros and cons? Is that universal? How is that decided?
There are some companies that are requirements of bids that go out that they'll say you can't have dual axle trucks. You need to have the single axle truck, so they don't bring that heavy weight, because most alleys are 2 inches as opposed to a road that might be 4+. So yeah, you do get issues over time with that. So there's something to look at as we're going through this process.
All right.
Any other questions on that? I do want to take a moment, and I want Ron to kind of talk a little bit about the Margaret and the First Street reconstruction project. And he's got some stories of the number of water main breaks that have occurred in that area, and kind of wanted him to talk about that. And then, Ron, if you could also talk about what kind of projects you're looking at that may need a major reconstruction for 2033 and 2035.
okay.
Is this Margaret and First Street?
First Avenue.
Thank you.
Yep.
Just wanted to clarify.
First Avenue. So if you see in the CIP, you'll see from 2030 out to 2034, it was all pavement rehabilitation, and there wasn't any major projects in there. When we first started looking at this years ago, sitting down, we were, because our road ratings were so low and there were so many bad roads, and just talking with residents, and we're thinking, how are we going to we won't get to some of these roads for 10 years. And these people are like, we want it done, now, or they're looking at getting it done now. So we looked at this pavement rehab and going out there and trying to cover as much roads, put it down as much blacktop as we could, get the most bang for our buck. And we knew we'd get to a point where we'd start covering up roads that probably we shouldn't, or because the utilities are, bad. And so anyway, over the course, what happened over last year, we had a water main break on First Avenue. And the water main break was running into one of the residents' houses. And so the guy was standing in his basement, water's going into his house, and I gotta tell him, hey, give me an hour, I gotta notify people, let them know before we shut this water main down. And he was down there frantically making a dam and bucketing and doing, what he could to, stop this. So anyway, we got the water shut off, fixed the water main break, and then Randy and I were talking, and we're like, man, we've had a lot of water main breaks on First Avenue. And, we're like, well, let's go out. The records that we have for the ones that we know, we sent the guys out looking at patches in the road, and basically from First Street to Highway 120, First Avenue, we went out there, we counted, and with all of our records, and we have 24 water main breaks on that road.
Within what period of time?
I guess since I've been here,
Okay.
the period of time so they've probably happened over the past, 25 years, let's say. But as I was talking to the insurance company for the resident, in his house, and we didn't know where that was gonna go and how that was gonna work out, I woke up one night, laying in bed, and I'm thinking, at what point am I being negligent and not replacing a water main on a road when there's that many water main breaks on a road? If that person came to me and said, what's the deal, Ron? There's 24 water main breaks on this road, and you don't have any plans to redo this road or, replace this road. So, it just got me thinking, or, Randy and I started talking about it, and going, I don't know that we can stop doing these big projects or these road projects with, replacing the utilities. And there's another place in town where there's, I don't know, there's quite that many, but there's probably 15 on a road. In another area on the other side of town. So it just got us to talking about, we really can't stop doing these full reconstruction projects. We have to address some of these problems because they're just gonna keep, it's just gonna keep happening, it shows that. So, I know they're expensive to do, and, we can say this about multiple different parts of town where, hey, we have to start working on, or start replacing these water mains and utilities because we have to do our due diligence and be able to have a serious conversation with the residents about, why, so we basically had WSB put together, they went and looked at doing Margaret, because Margaret's a main thoroughfare. You can see all the dead ash trees that were taken off on Margaret. Dan made a comment, Dan comes in on Margaret every day, and we cut down a bunch of the dead ash trees with electric on Margaret, and Dan's like, hey, I think the road got worse when the trees got removed. It's just, you noticed how bad the road is on there, and it's, it's a main thoroughfare through town. And the road is very wide. It's it's an expensive road. So Morgan and his crew put together some numbers for doing Margaret and then all of First Avenue, and it turns into a 2-year project for something that we could afford. So that's where it would be at 2931, and then looking out further. 7th Avenue, the rest of 7th Avenue was on for a road reconstruction project, basically from Charles up to 120. But again, that's another expensive project. So that's an area that we're looking. And then also up in like the Mesabi, what are the other roads up there? Shawnee, Navajo. That's another area where we have a bunch of continuous water main breaks up there. So, like I said, I think Dan brought it up, or Morgan brought it up, for 33, 35, or 33, 34, 35, we have to look at some of these other areas and get some, rough numbers in there. But it's gonna be something that I feel that we have to, keep doing these kind of projects every other year for what we can afford, stay within what we can afford, and do as much as we can with them, because this water main, it just keeps breaking, and I just want to show that we're doing the best that we can with what we can afford, so.
When you did that water main repair this past winter, did you do it as a repair only, or is it gonna be a permanent fix? So if they went in and did that project, they wouldn't have to go into that guy's property?
No, so it was our water main in the road.
Okay.
So when we do a repair, depending on how the break is, we call it a Band-Aid, but it's basically a 15-inch to 20-inch stainless steel, rubber coated Band-Aid. It's got, probably a dozen bolts on it, and and squeezes around the repair. Or if we have to do replace a piece of pipe, depending on how the crack is on it. But that's basically, it's a repair. I don't know how many of these Band-Aids are in town. There's probably hundreds of them, throughout all the years. But when they come in to put a new water main in, that all gets replaced, and then the service gets replaced up to the curb stop in the residence yard. Dan, I don't know if I hit on everything that you.
So circling back to that, we are patching, we're just going to use First Avenue right now because it's clearly a trouble spot. So we're patching the water main.
Yep.
And then fixing the piece of the road that needs
Yep.
fixing. So ideally, what we need to be doing is take First Avenue and then Shawnee, Mesabi, right? Am I saying these right? And figure out, all right, we're going to start with this project first. We're going to get we're going to fix all the water mains there instead of patching it, and then we're just going to continue working our way through the worst areas.
Yep, so these would be some of the big deciding factors that we use for where the next project area is gonna be. And like I said, what's tough about it is that I understand each resident, their 100 feet of their property, is the most important, in their eyes. And that road that they drive on every day is, the most important in their eyes. And that's what's tough about it, is that we have these things going on that's underground that no resident thinks about after the road is dug up and that's buried, and they don't think about it again. But like I said, it really resonated with me when, there's a resident standing there, and again, the resident was great with how we dealt with it and how the whole thing turned out. I mean, it was a great person to deal with and very understanding for a really bad situation. And when when you stop to think about it, like I said, that resident could come back and say, hey, there's been 24 breaks on this road. When are you guys going to do something about this? And if I don't even have it on a plan, or we're even talking about it, at some point I'm like, all right, that falls back on me, or, hey, we can't afford to do it, so you're going to have to live with it. And, we just have to keep planning for the future, live within our means in doing it. And just so you guys know and the residents know that there is a lot that goes into these decisions on where these projects are. There's a lot of factors in there, and we talk about it all the time, Randy and I, with our guys, our crew. I mean, we have heated arguments on where the next project area should be. This road, that's ridiculous. And it's not someone there where they're like, my parents live on this road, so I think we should do that. It's more, this road's worse than that, and this road, so there's a lot that does go into it. And these water mains or the utilities are a bigger factor in these decisions when we make, for what roads this might be. And like I said, First Avenue, that road is really bad. The water main is really bad. Margaret, it's really bad. There's not a ton of water main that runs down Margaret, but the road is, really bad. And like I said, when we're talking about these projects and deciding on areas or bringing up areas or picking areas, please ask the questions. If you guys are, why are you doing this? Hey, I'm sure you have all had residents, my road needs to be fixed because it's so bad. Ask us the questions. Well, there is a lot of thought. We just don't throw a dart at the board, even though we could with a lot of the roads. But we'll definitely give you the explanation for it, and we can definitely tell you that it's been walked. Randy has walked every inch of our pavement preservation for this year. Every inch of it multiple times. And then he'll be, because we do spot curb replacement, and hey, this gets taken out, we're not doing this, we're just doing this, and we do that to stay within the budget. And what about that? Oh, we can stop here, so people will complain, why didn't you replace my curb here? And we're working within the budget that we have. Mm-hmm. But there is a ton of effort that goes into what we do for spending the money that we have, and we really try to maximize that as best that we can. So if you guys have questions on it, please ask. It's not going to be, well, we just thought this might be a good place. We can give you some details behind it. And
I think it's helpful presenting it the way that you did tonight and letting us know about all these water main breaks. I also think it would be helpful as we continue to move forward to know, all right, this is the 7th water main break on First Avenue within the past 5 years, or whatever that looks like. We don't want to be beyond that. And if that's the case and we're continuing to be beyond the 7 and we're getting in the 20s, then we have a real issue, and that street should be one of the first to get done, or whoever's street it doesn't matter, whatever street it is, but that should be the next concentration.
Yep.
Now, when you were, excuse me.
Go ahead.
When you were talking about Margaret Street, was that from all the way from south down to the new addition there by that whole stretch?
Yep, correct. We're gonna be doing a little from 19th Avenue to 17th Avenue this year in our pavement preservation. That blacktop there can't be patched anymore. The ground is actually pushing through the blacktop. So with these pavement preservations, on the off years, from the big projects. You know, we're gonna try to do some of the roads that we haven't had utility or water main problems on, you know, water main breaks on. And, you know, to try to cover up, you know, as much as we get some road replaced. And, you know, hopefully that's a 10 to 15-year fix that'll buy us the time that we need, you know, so we can get that pavement index score up higher, you know, and, you know, meet some of the people's needs, you know, for some of these roads that are bad.
Okay, cool.
I have another thing. When we're factoring in these reconstruction costs, are we evaluating areas that we want to put sidewalks or that sidewalks are being considered? And are sidewalks included in the installation of these new roads?
In these reconstruction projects, if there's sidewalks in there already, we're basically replacing what is there. You know, basically in
The
kind.
entire thing, so that's the sidewalk as well. Well, and while we're talking about First Street, let's talk about First Avenue, let's talk about First Street. So if we're gonna redo, I'm just using this as an example because I know it has sidewalk. If you're gonna do First Street, then you're gonna also reconstruct the sidewalk, correct?
Okay, so that's a great street to bring up. So we just did an overlay on that on First Street last year.
Yep.
And we didn't go, so the pavement rehabilitation that we're doing, we're kind of focusing on the road and the curbs. So unless it's a major reconstruct, we're not gonna go and do the sidewalk
Okay.
at that time. So we overlaid the surface on First Street, and we didn't do anything with the sidewalk. We did some spot curb repair, and we did some manhole and structure repair.
And ped ramps.
Oh, and ped ramps when we go and
Yes.
do that.
Yep.
But we didn't go and do the sidewalks. Now, sidewalks, I know exactly where you're going with that. I mean, there's a lot of bad sidewalks in town. We do spot repairs, sorry. Spot repairs on some sidewalks in town, from tree roots growing. A lot of times the sidewalks are bad, the sidewalks that are bad around town are usually from tree roots, boulevard trees, and a lot of times when we go to do that, we have to remove a tree to repair that sidewalk because the roots are growing under it. A lot of times the residents don't want the tree removed, so a lot of sidewalks stay that way because, you know, that have the big trip hazards on them because the sidewalk doesn't, you know, they don't want the trees removed, so for us to repair the sidewalks. But we do kind of spot repairs on the sidewalks. But if First Street was a full reconstruct project, all the sidewalks would have got redone on First.
Yeah, and just to add on that, I think that's consistent with past conversations with this council and past councils as well, too, that for the benefit of the public, benefit of the city council, to remember that if it's a full reconstruct, that's an opportunity to reset everything within the right-of-way, including things like sidewalks, right? But when some of these pavement preservation efforts, from a budgetary standpoint, they're really focused on the asphalt and the quality of the roads. And if there were additional budget that were available that maybe were associated with concrete or with sidewalks, that could be a future consideration. But really, the way that the program is built right now is just to focus from a pavement preservation is to maybe do some spot repairs, but not look at new sidewalks or not look at major sidewalk improvements. But we are committed to making ADA improvements at the intersections with like ped ramps. That is something that typically will go along with not necessarily a maintenance overlay project. Maybe sometimes we might do that, but with kind of like our 2024 street maintenance project, that was more of a robust overlay project. And we did have some ped ramp improvements, some ADA improvements, some spot concrete curb and gutter repair, that sort of thing. But again, just focusing on the asphalt, not necessarily out beyond the curb and gutter, just kind of the roadway itself.
Do we have a sidewalk preservation plan?
We do not currently have a sidewalk preservation plan. That's an opportunity for the future. And I guess I can't speak to whether or not you even have a line item for sidewalk.
No, it's just it's a maintenance item that we use. We don't have a sidewalk plan that I know of.
I'd like to make a recommendation that we consider something like that.
Yeah, it's not to say it's non-existent, because it's part of our 2040 comp plan that when we get into areas where we need to make improvements for especially for children in our own schools and our own parks, to be able to have that transportation for that without them having to go into the street to have that. That has been talked about many times at the council level, and that is something that is looked at these jobs.
Are we also doing it down at, by Casey? There were some sidewalks that ended in the middle of nowhere. Now we're extending them.
That's correct. It didn't even make a full loop into like the park.
So
it
now
didn't-
we're fixing
yes,
it as
we
we
are.
go along. So
Correct, and that was identified in the comprehensive plan, as Brian mentioned, yeah, so that is a part of it. But in terms of like rating or evaluating sidewalks, existing sidewalks, similar to what we're doing for the roads, that hasn't been broached yet.
And is that something that we can start visiting? I'm not sure where some bad sidewalks are in the city. If there's not even a section, there could be just a square itself that needs to be fixed, or there needs to be lifted because it's sagged or whatever it is.
Yeah, I don't have a specific like line item for that. It's just I use out of like the maintenance money that we have. We usually look at that towards, fall and then see if we can go out and do some of those spot repairs that are really bad,
Notice
Yep.
on the one, Margaret, you're talking 19th to 17th, there's, I forget the name of the house on the corner there with the horse tire upper. Their sidewalk on that Margaret side must have been a
Brutal.
lot of tree roots over that time because you're up and down quite a bit.
Yeah, there's a lot of bad sidewalks in town.
Both the Margaret Street and the First Avenue areas that we've been discussing here, those would be potentially full reconstructs, and so that would encompass some sidewalk work as well, once we get to that point.
Are they on both sides of the street or just one side?
Just one, I think.
Margaret's on just one.
Yeah.
Margaret's on one, yeah, right, okay. Yep, west side, okay.
I'd like to make a recommendation that we talk about the sidewalks further at another time. And having some sort of preservation plan. Thank you, Morgan. Thank you, Ron.
We have a little bit of extra time here.
Oh, thanks, Dan.
So, yeah.
Into our bathroom
I wasn't going to let you go quite yet. So the next big categories in the capital improvement plan are facilities is about 17%, and then vehicles and equipment is about 12.5%. Our next meeting, we will start to get into some of those other components. But for tonight, I just want to bring to your attention, I won't take the last 14 minutes, but I'll just take a little bit, just to draw your eyes to some of the bigger components that are in our CIP. And that is, and from what I've been hearing, these numbers really should have been adjusted when all the department heads had their opportunities to review and complete the plan. For equipment, there's a sizable one in 2030, and that's the ladder vehicle for the fire department. It's out here in 2030 at under $1.6 million. So that's a huge one. The remaining kind of components in there are, the plows, all of the vehicles. We're seeing a pretty consistent, Public Works, many of their vehicles are 10 to 15 year replacement cycles. I think our police is at a 6-year recycling piece, but that's one of the big gotchas coming up. That's in that vehicle and equipment category. When we look at utility infrastructure preservation, again, I'm hearing just recently after this that the number's probably significantly higher than this, but there's the new Tower Park water tower, and it's in 2028 at $4.3 million. And I've kind of heard that number probably should be higher than that. But again, I'm just trying to draw your attention to some of the bigger components that are really driving some of those, because we covered a lot, 50% underneath the street and utilities. And clearly, I mean, from the discussion of city council, I got the feeling you completely understood the need of that infrastructure of the streets. And then going even beyond that component, an absolutely fantastic suggestion that we really do need to start having a line in there for sidewalk preservation in addition to it. We're making that investment. We want to make sure that it's good, and we want to make sure that it's safe and that we're preserving it to the best of our abilities. And then when we start looking at, kind of the parks and the playgrounds, and, there's a number of significant components that are in there right now. There's the 1.1 million for Third Street concept design, a downtown open space in 2028 of just under 800,000. You're seeing in 2027 or Flex Field at McKnight of just under 900,000. So there's some big, huge items that are in that playground. And then, the next biggest facility, or next biggest category at just under 17% is the building and facility improvements. And, there's 3 major facilities. They're all pretty much in the same age group. So you'll see some of the big expenses that are there, between the Public Works, City Hall, and the community center. So I kind of want to bring your attention to some of those bigger items. In our next meeting, we'll be covering into those and having more of a discussion, and we'll have other department heads here. Ron will be here, of course, because Ron is responsible for so much. So Ron will be here to kind of discuss some of those other components. But I wanted to draw it to your attention that we do have a number of them that are really big drivers into that cost, because we'll try to get covering the next 50% of what the CIP, so you have your understanding. Now, kind of want to give everybody at least a 5-minute break, so it's 6:20 right now. I'd really like to hear from each one of you your thoughts right now just on the CIP. We've presented, $50 million worth, half of the 10-year CIP. Kind of want to hear your honest thoughts, feedback.
It's needed, and I appreciate that Ron is bringing up these water main breaks. He's acknowledging it. He's going out there. Residents are seeing it. He's facing, and his staff are facing these residents. So to be here tonight and share that, I appreciate you, and I appreciate that you woke up in the middle of the night and we're thinking about it. I mean, our employees have the best interests for the city in mind. And it's important that the public sees that as well. So thank you, Morgan, for being here. I mean, having the graphs, and I don't know if I know we've published this in the past on the website. I don't know if it still exists on the website, but I think having it still posted on the website is good.
And overall, these, numbers are staggering. We have to take them in. I mean, this is a lot of things that are coming up in the next 10 years that we have to keep the city running, and focus, of course, on, public safety, roads, and, infrastructure. Those are the 3 main things. And we say 50% to roads, then we got the rest of it still. Fire truck, we got the other things that are coming up. So it's definitely, when we look at it, there's a lot of decisions to be made, and there's a lot of things that go into this budget in the city, and we appreciate, all the information to go out 10 years, to get an idea of what's coming. Things will change here and there, like you said, water tower maybe for them, and also fire truck, how much they've gone up, 20, 30 for the ladder truck, maybe more, but at least we have them on the radar. So, and we're trying to focus on, try to do the best we can.
Well, and Dan, like you said, if we need to inflate these numbers, especially with the water tower around the corner, we need to look at that now.
Yes, absolutely. Yep. Other comments or thoughts?
I'm in agreement with starting roads, the ones that are worse, get rid of them, get them done, and proceed year to year to year, and just start and work our way through it, and follow the plan that you've got. And Margaret Street is one of the number 1 roads that needs to be done, and also First Avenue, First Avenue, that one should be done with that many water main breaks, and those residents are all deserving of a new road and concrete curbing and sidewalk if they have it. And then we'll go from there each year after that.
Thank you.
Yeah, and I really appreciate all the detail that you give us and also that you send us so we can, dive into it. I appreciate that detail. Thank you.
So that'll conclude this section for tonight in the workshop of 50%. Remember, moving forward with this plan on just the streets is a 3.2% levy increase every year for the next 10 years. So with that, I thank you very much.
And you look too, I mean, when you have, it's that way, but it's sharing for everybody when it
Oh,
comes to
absolutely.
that. Because right now, people were getting, $8,000, for, adding that, plus they're paying interest on, assessments and things like that. So it's one of those things where it's spread out, but we're getting a lot done, and we've accomplished a lot in the last year.
Yes, we have, and I personally want to thank Morgan and Ron and Randy. I get to hear these stories, and I wanted him to bring some of those stories in front of city council, because they really did have, they really hit me. There was quite of a big magnitude, especially with the water main break. So I wanted him to tell those stories in front of city council so you understand what's happening on a day in, day out basis. So I thank you very much for your time. Look forward to the next meeting, and we'll try to cover the other 50% of the CIP. And then in the first meeting in September, we'll have some options of some items that we need to talk about for decision from city council to get prepared for that maximum levy. And then in the second meeting in September, we'll set that maximum levy. Doesn't mean we're done with the budget.
Right.
Because we've got plenty of time. It doesn't become totally approved until sometime in December. So I thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thanks,
Appreciate
Aaron.
it. I have a call for adjournment, and we'll have a 5-minute break before we start.
So moved.
So move, Councilmember Schwer. Second, Councilmember McKenzie. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. See you in 5.